Now I'm going to introduce our speaker. And, Brian, believe you began your ministry in 2003. You went over to Unity Village and were there till 2009. And then was over in Santa Maria at Light of the Chapel till 2016. And we're blessed that he joined us here in 2018.
There we go.
And the thing that I feel so blessed with Brian is, he is the real deal. You talk about the fifth principle, which is, you have to be it in the world. You can't just talk about it. But he doesn't just talk the talk. He walks the walk. And he walks it most of the time with Pierre. But so here's our Reverend Brian Walker.
Thank you, Lisa. Every minister knows that Lisa actually got that sequence right. You get the money first, so fork it over. So a man's driving down the highway and when an Easter bunny crosses the road and he can't avoid him, hits the bunny. He stops, he gets out, the Easter bunny's dead. He's distraught, he doesn't know what to do. A car is following behind, a woman gets out, and the man says, "Oh my God, I've killed the Easter bunny. Look, there won't be any Easter for the kids this year. What should I do?" And the woman, without saying a word, runs back to her car, pulls out a can, sprays the Easter bunny all over. He leaps up, gathers the eggs, starts to hop off, and waves, and hops a little farther, and waves again, and does it again. And the man says, "What did you do?" And so she holds over the can so he can read. And it says, "Hair restorer and permanent wave." So about 2,000 years ago, and it's just about 2,000 years, that something happened in the Middle East that was significant, shall we say, and in fact has been reverberating down the ages ever since. And so as we gather here on Easter morning, I think it's quite reasonable to say, what happened? And what difference does it make? Well, it seems that an itinerant preacher came to the big city and he wanted to spread the good news. Now, some people perceived him as a threat to the established church of that day, which of course was not true. And some people thought that he was a threat to the Roman Empire, and he wanted to set up a new kingdom, which was not true either. So there was a great deal of resistance and confusion and fear about this activity that was happening around this itinerant preacher. So ultimately, he was arrested on trumped-up charges, and after a mock trial, he was taken to a high hill, and with two common thieves, he was brutally crucified. Now, of course, everyone thought that this would be the end of this person's influence, because there had been other itinerant preachers, other charismatic preachers who had come and they had suffered the same fate, and they were no longer heard from. But after 3 days, they discovered that the stone to his tomb was rolled away, and many ensuing appearances to disciples and others seemed to confirm that in a very real sense that he had risen from the dead. He had come back from the dead. Now, in our modern world, we think about this and say, now wait a minute here. When you're dead, you're dead. We don't come back from the dead. And so it raises a lot of questions. And I'm not here to answer that part of it. Because there are some things that are still a mystery. In fact, I got reminded last night, Kathy and I went out to Risen Christ Monastery in San Luis Obispo, which is an outlet, an outreach program from the monastery, the New Camaldoli Monastery up in Big Sur. Anyway, and I got reminded of this term, the Paschal Mystery. The Paschal Mystery, I'm sure some of you have probably heard of it before. Paschal is related to the word Passover. And so all of the activities that happen during Holy Week, including the Lord's Supper and the crucifixion and the resurrection, all around that is considered to be the Paschal Mystery. So let's just embrace that as a mystery that we don't have an explanation for. Now, it becomes increasingly obvious when we do look at the evidence that this itinerant preacher was no ordinary person. That he had discovered a new dimension of life, and by means of a transcendent perspective, he moved through this experience that we call death, and without being affected by it. So one of the questions that comes up, and that came up back then, and is still a question that people have different ideas about, is, who was this person? Who was this Jesus? And so there was a lot of, again, back in early Christianity, there was a lot of discussion about, who is this? And so there were some different ideas. One of them was that he was a regular human being, and he lived, and he died. But there were other people who thought, no, that's not true. So they had a council, and they got together, and they decided that Jesus was fully divine, fully human. As it says in the creeds, true God from true God. Now, we in New Thought, that is unity, religious science, related kind of mystical kinds of approaches, take the view that Jesus was a human being just like us. That he came, he lived, and he discovered how to do what he did. And so when we look at the scriptures and we see that, Jesus spent 40 days and 40 nights out in the desert fasting and being tempted, like you and I get tempted. We may not do the 40-day fast thing, but we have these experiences in our life where our soul, our conscience is telling us, no, not that way, this way. And so we have to decide about those things. He went to the temple and saw the money changers, and threw out those tables and got really angry at what was going on at the temple. We may have had that experience as well at some time. Again, another idea that he's human. But most importantly, when it came for him to reflect on in the Garden of Gethsemane his current circumstances, how he was going to face this, and like the human that we believe he was, he said, "Do I really have to do this?" And he made the choice. Not my, but thy will be done. And that, friends, is the difference. That's why people around the world come together and celebrate this day, because it had a great meaning. A highly evolved human being, Jesus of Nazareth, let go of his ego, surrendered to his higher power, and followed that divine guidance. And it led to overcoming death. So, what Unity Minister Eric Butterworth calls the Easter perspective, is where we lift up our eyes and see things from a higher point of view, the highest point of view, from the divine point of view. The Easter perspective. That's the perspective that Jesus was able to cultivate and express. So I want to share with you a quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson describing prayer. Prayer is the contemplation of the facts of life from the highest point of view. Prayer is the contemplation of the facts of life from the highest point of view. So if you call Silent Unity, Unity's prayer ministry, or if you pray with one of our prayer chaplains, they are going to offer you affirmative prayer, which I think this is a perfect definition for. The contemplation of the facts of life from the highest point of view. So another way to put it is, don't tell God how big your problem is. Tell your problem how big your God is. Because your God is big enough to handle any problem, even death. So the Easter perspective, that's what the whole resurrection story is all about. Easter is a profound symbol of new beginnings. It's the cornerstone of the Christian faith. That we have the power to transform, to resurrect, to become anew. It represents the triumph of life over death, spirit over matter, and eternal truth over transient perceptions. The resurrection story is not an event to be commemorated, but a living principle of spiritual truth that each of us can experience. And so when we come together each Easter, that's the invitation that you have, is to walk through this experience. And where does it lead you? To answer the question, and this is the difference that it makes, why are we here? And the short answer is to give love, to extend God's love to the entire world, to the human family, to the planet, to the universe. That's what we're here for. The idea of love, unconditional love, was uppermost in Jesus' teachings and the life that he demonstrated. So his example shows us that he could even embrace those people who could have easily been conceived as his enemies. And so if we follow his example, then we have an experience that there's no room in our minds and hearts for thoughts and feelings of fear, of anger, of jealousy, of malice. All of those things we realize are not the truth of who we are. So it's what we were created for, is to give and to be love. So we limit ourselves when we think, I'm here to be an actress, or I'm here to be a writer, I'm here to be a scientist, I'm here to be an artist. Our purpose is because all of these things are a matter of form. But the content, no matter what we do, is that we are love, that we are a particular light and vibrational energy that brings love, that we live love, and we are that love wherever we go. Jesus, who represents the Easter perspective, that seeing from the highest perspective, is like a guide, a teacher, an elder brother who can help us if we ask. He doesn't force himself on us. We need to invite him in. So the mystic notion of the Christ mind is that if you go deep enough into your own mind, and that you go deep enough into your own mind, that we are all connected into the one Christ mind. There is one mind that holds us all. And when we go deep enough, and when we do our practice seriously enough, disciplined enough, we have that experience of that interconnection, that we are all one. Now, friends, I don't know if you've been observing the state of the world lately, but a lot of people think it's kind of chaotic. And so, so much so that there are some people who think that if we don't evolve as a species, that we're not going to survive. In fact, the Secretary General of the United Nations says that that the current path that we are on, that is not survivable for our grandchildren. So that's pretty sobering. And and I've got to say, as I look out on the world and what's happening, it could be true. The way that we treat each other and the planet is so destructive that God knows what's going to happen. But Jesus, and again, for those of you who are not necessarily aligned as Jesus as your avatar, your guru, and there are other traditions that basically say the same thing. And so whether it's the light enlightenment of the Buddha under the Bodhi tree, or it's the Israelites who are getting to the promised land, or it's the resurrection of Jesus, the message is the same. That we have the power to transform ourselves, to transform our world, and to transform the universe. So Gandhi said that the problem with the world is that humanity is not in its right mind. We're not in our right mind individually or collectively. And the resurrection, friends, is a return to our right mind. to our higher selves, to that Christ mind, to that Easter perspective. So the time that we are in now that appears so chaotic is the time between, symbolically, the time between the crucifixion and the resurrection. And we don't know how long that this time's going to last. But it doesn't matter. In the Buddhist tradition, you don't cling to what you do. You do what you're called to do, and whatever the effect is it's what it is and what it's meant to be. Susan B. Anthony didn't leave to see the passage of the 19th Amendment, but every time a woman votes, her soul must tingle. And the great cathedrals of Europe were built by hand over hundreds of years. And the workers weren't going to see the church completed in their lifetimes. But they lived for that possibility. So when you're in your right mind, when you have the Easter perspective, you know that you're working for the ages. So there's an old rabbinical saying, you're not expected to complete the task, but neither are you permitted to abandon it. So that's what we're all called to, friends. This is the difference that it makes, is that we're all called to follow Jesus, the Buddha, Moses, whoever your avatar, whoever your guru is, to take that higher perspective and to make your contribution to the human family and the planet and the universe. In the song that we sang, Here I Am, Lord, it says, who will share my love with them? Who will share my love with them? Whom shall I send? And the answer is, here I am. Here I am, Lord. Send me. That's what your soul is calling you to. So pay attention and answer. Your life depends on it. So now, I started off by sharing with you the resurrection story of the Easter Bunny. All right? And that we're all called to this resurrection experience, this Easter experience. Unfortunately, friends, there is no corresponding hair restorer for us. Okay? You have to actually have the discipline to do your spiritual practice, to make the choices every day, to live out what you believe in, and that will inevitably lead you to the place that we're all guided to. So I want to leave you with an affirmation, something you can take out here with you, and when people go, what did they do at that weird church for Easter? You can tell them. So here it is. So just listen, okay? Centered in Christ, I am the resurrection and the life. I am the resurrection. Centered in Christ, I am the resurrection and life. I want you to claim that. And I want you to take it out from here today and know that that is your calling. Centered in Christ, I am the resurrection and the life. Together, centered in Christ, I am the resurrection and the life. All right? So we're going to do that one more time. And this time, I want you to say it with some feeling, okay? Just to make the pastor feel a little better. Can you do that? Together, centered in life, I am the resurrection and the life. God bless you.